Hey guys, tonight we're stepping aboard a Viking longship, a lean, beautiful vessel that's both your home and your coffin. You're standing on the deck, the cold North Sea spray misting your face as the low sun bleeds across a sky that stretches on forever. Below you, the ship's timbers groan, a deep, rhythmic breathing that will soon become the only sound you truly recognize. The wind fills the square sail with a thunderous thwomp, and you feel the surge as you lurch forward, leaving the familiar shoreline as a thin, forgotten thread behind you. This isn't a cruise, it's a brutal commitment. A one-way ticket, perhaps. You probably won't survive this, but hey, you'll at least have a story, or become 1.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you in the comments below. It's a nice little way to feel connected, even though we're all just tiny dots in our own quiet nights. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the deck roll and pitch under your feet. It's a new, unsettling sensation, a constant fight for balance that will, over time, become second nature. You're not just a passenger, you're part of the ship's living, breathing organism. The first few days are a blur of seasickness and a frantic need to get your sea legs. It's a humbling, miserable experience, and you find yourself clinging to the gunwale, watching your breakfast become chum for the fish. The older, grizzled sailors just laugh, a low, guttural sound that's somehow both comforting and deeply annoying. The sea will take what it wants. One of them grunts, and it always wants your stomach first. The longship itself is a masterpiece of minimalist engineering. There are no fancy cabins, no decks below for a quiet escape. You sleep right here, on the open deck, a wool blanket your only defense against the night's chill. Your shield, painted with your family symbol, is lashed to the side, a colorful, defiant display that also serves to keep some of the spray from soaking you completely. You're surrounded by the tools of your trade, or stacked neatly, coils of rope that are constantly being checked for fraying, and the ever-present stench of tar, sea salt, and unwashed bodies. This initial period is all about settling into the new rhythm. You're now part of a small, self-contained universe. The familiar world of your village, your home, your family, has been replaced by the faces around you, the sway of the ship, and the boundless, indifferent ocean. The sun becomes your clock, the stars your compass, and the wind your master. You learn to read the waves, to anticipate the roll of the deck, and to understand the different sounds the ship makes. A high-pitched groan from the mast means one thing. A low rumble from the keel means another. You're becoming a sailor, whether you like it or not. Historians still argue whether the longship's famous dragon head figureheads were left on during voyages or taken down. Some believe they were removed to avoid frightening the land spirits upon arrival, while others argue they were a permanent, defiant symbol of the ship's identity. You squint up at the snarling, carved face of your ship's dragon, the water sheeting off its wooden snout as if it's crying a river of tears. You can't imagine taking it down. It feels like the soul of the ship, the only thing standing between you and the cold, dark depths. It's watching you, a silent, unblinking guardian. A quirky detail you notice is the way the men use their beards. Those with long, full beards often braid them or tuck them into their tunics to keep them from getting soaked and heavy with sea spray. It's a small, practical measure, but you see it everywhere. You're also told that some men believe a braided beard offers a small measure of protection, a kind of personal talisman. You don't have much of a beard yourself yet, but you imagine the feeling of the rough braid against your chin, a little anchor of comfort in a world of constant motion. The ship sighs around you, a slow, gentle sound as you begin to drift off. You're no longer on solid ground, and you know, deep in your bones, you won't be for a very, very long time. The initial misery of the open sea has faded, replaced by a dull ache in your muscles and a constant awareness of the ship's subtle movements. You are no longer just a person on a boat. You are an active part of its survival. Your days are dictated by the sun and the needs of the longship. The work is relentless, and it's a constant, shared effort. There are no passengers here, only crew. Your first duty of the day, after a cold, hard awakening, is to check the sail and its ropes. The sail itself is a massive, patchwork thing of wool, and the ropes are essential lifelines. You run your hands over the rough hemp, feeling for any sign of a thin spot or a broken strand. A weak rope could spell disaster, so you and the others are constantly mending, splicing, and replacing. It's a meditative, rhythmic task that keeps your hands busy and your mind focused. Your second, less glamorous task is bailing water. The longship's design, with its low sides and open deck, means that water is a constant companion. Sea spray washes over the sides in a steady stream, and in a heavy swell, small waves can slosh onto the deck. Water also seeps in through the seams of the planks. So, a few times a day, you grab a leather bucket or a carved wooden scoop and get to work, sloshing the cold, brackish water over the side. It's a Sisyphean task. The sea always wins, but it's a necessary one. A waterlogged ship is a slow ship, and a slow ship is a vulnerable ship. You're amazed at how much water a seemingly solid vessel can take on. It's a constant battle against the ocean's slow, persistent encroachment. A little joke makes the rounds among the crew. We're not sailing the sea, we're just delaying its inevitable victory. Another essential duty is preparing and maintaining the oars. When the wind dies, the only way forward is by muscle power. You're assigned a position, on in or bench, and you soon learn to coordinate your movements with your fellow rowers. The rhythm is hypnotic. Push forward, dip the oar, pull back with all your might. The long, rhythmic creak of the oar locks becomes the new song of the ship. It's grueling work, but there's a strange sense of camaraderie in the shared effort. It's a moment where you and your shipmates are all pulling in the same direction, literally and figuratively. Historians still argue whether Vikings used a steering or a proper rudder for steering their ships. While most ships had a side-mounted steering or on the starboard side, hence the word starboard from the Old Norse styri meaning rudder and bor meaning side. Some sources suggest that early longships might have used a more primitive central rudder. You stand near the steering or strisber, watching the captain's steady hands as he guides the ship. It looks like a simple task, but you can see the constant, tiny adjustments he makes, a testament to his decades of experience. A quirky tidbit you learn is that the Vikings sometimes used a kind of communal vomit bag. When the seasickness hit hard, and you're too weak to even get to the side, the crew would use a dried and hollowed-out animal stomach to, well, contain the mess. It's a gruesome, but practical, solution. You shudder at the thought, grateful. You've at least found your sea legs, even if they're still a bit wobbly. Even meal prep is a communal duty. The ship's provisions are carefully guarded and rationed, but someone has to portion out the dried fish and hard bread. You take a turn, your hands meticulously dividing the meager rations. Every piece, no matter how small, is precious. The shared work, from bailing to rowing to mending, forges a bond between you and your shipmates. You're no longer a collection of individuals. You're a single, functioning unit, each person a vital part of the whole. This is the reality of life on the open sea. You rely on each other for everything. The ocean is vast and unforgiving, but inside the small wooden shell of the longship, you're a community, a small tribe of weary warriors and traders. And it's this shared rhythm of work and survival that keeps you all sane. The sun dips below the horizon, and the world is plunged into an inky blackness you never knew existed. There are no city lights here to soften the edges of the night. Up on the deck, you find yourself staring at the sky. It's a vast, dizzying tapestry of stars, so dense and bright it feels like you could reach out and pluck them from the heavens. This is your clock now, your calendar, and your map all in one. You learn to recognize the major constellations, not for their mythological stories, but for their practical utility. The stars are your only reliable signposts in a world of featureless blue point. One of the more experienced sailors points out a certain cluster, what you'd call the Big Dipper today. See the two stars at the end of the ladle? He asks. You nod. They always point to the North Star. He explains how that star, Polaris, stays fixed in the same spot, a silent sentinel in the northern sky. It's an anchor of stability in a world that constantly shifts and moves. You spend hours tracing imaginary lines between the stars, trying to get a feel for the vast, cosmic grid. It's a skill you must master, for in the endlessness of the sea, A misplaced star could mean the difference between reaching your destination and being lost forever. But the stars aren't the only tool. You're also shown a simple, yet ingenious device called a sunstone. Historians still argue whether these were Icelandic spar, a calcite crystal, or a different type of mineral, but its purpose was the same: to find the sun on a cloudy day. The captain takes a small, clear piece of crystal from a pouch, holding it up to the overcast sky. He rotates it slowly, and suddenly, a bright pinprick of light flashes through the stone. He explains that by rotating the crystal and noting the polarization of light, you can locate the sun's exact position, even through a thick cloud cover. It's like a magical little compass for the sky, and you're amazed at the elegant simplicity of it. It's a quirky, almost fantastical tidbit of Viking navigation, and it makes you feel like you're part of a secret society, privy to ancient, forgotten knowledge. The passing of time is also measured in a more physical way. You and the others use a simple sundial carved into a piece of wood, but it's not just for the hours. It also helps you track the days and the seasons. By marking the sun's position at noon each day, you can get a rough idea of your latitude. It's not precise, but it's enough to keep you on a general course. This is a mainstream historical fact that highlights the ingenuity of Viking sailors. They didn't have GPS, but they had a deep, practical understanding of their world. A joke is made about a new sailor who, after a few days, asked a grizzled veteran if they were heading east. The old salt simply pointed to the setting sun and said, "Only if you want to sail off the edge of the world, boy." It gets a tired, dry laugh from the crew. The humor is sparse and a bit grim, but it's a small release from the endless grind. The vast emptiness of the ocean can play tricks on your mind, and a little light-hearted banter, no matter how corny, can be a welcome relief. You feel a profound, humbling connection to something much larger than yourself. The stars, the sun, the wind, they are not just forces of nature. They are your guides and your companions. You're a tiny speck on an enormous canvas, and your survival depends on your ability to read the subtle signs of the universe. The night deepens, the stars continue their slow, silent march across the sky, and you drift off to sleep with the silent, glittering canopy as your blanket. With the sun high in the sky and the wind doing its job, there are often hours of downtime. The hard labor of rowing and bailing fades for a while, and the vast, empty sea offers little in the way of entertainment. This is where the mind, and the need for distraction, comes into its own. You find that the crew doesn't just sit and stare into the endless blue. They engage in competitive games that sharpen the wits and pass the time. The most popular of these is Nafatiful, or King's Table. It's a game of strategy, a bit like a combination of chess and checkers, and it's a fiercely guarded pastime. You sit cross-legged on the deck, a simple wooden board with an etched grid between you and your opponent. The pieces are small, carved stones or bone fragments. One side, the attackers, has a larger army of soldiers surrounding a smaller force with a king at its center. The goal for the king's side is to get the king to one of the four corner squares of the board. The attackers win by capturing the king. The rules are simple to learn but difficult to master, and you soon realize that a Viking's mind is just as sharp as their axe. The game is played in tense silence, broken only by the occasional grunt or a sharp intake of breath as a clever move is made. A new joke circulates about a particularly boastful young warrior who, after losing his third game in a row, muttered that he preferred fighting to thinking. The old salts just chuckled and told him he'd be better at the first if he was better at the second. Historians still argue whether Nafatiful was a direct precursor to chess or if the two games evolved independently. While chess has a more complex set of rules and a different objective, the strategic depth of Nafatiful suggests a shared lineage of board games designed to simulate warfare. The fact that different regions had slightly different board sizes and rules adds to the scholarly debate, making the game a fascinating window into Viking culture and its intellectual life. Aside from Nafatiful, dice games are a popular, if sometimes risky, way to pass the time. You see men gathered in a tight circle, shaking small bone or horn dice in their hands. They're betting on the outcome, not with coins, but with small, personal items, a carved comb, a good knife, or even a spare piece of dried fish. It's a low-stakes gamble, but the tension is real. A quirky tidbit you notice is that the dice themselves are often asymmetrical and a little rough, meaning they don't always roll fair. This adds a layer of unpredictable chance to the game, making it less about pure luck and more about the art of the throw. The men seem to relish this slight imperfection, a small reminder that life is never truly fair. The games provide more than just a distraction, they serve a social purpose. They create a pecking order based on skill and cunning, not just physical strength. You learn who to trust, who is quick-witted, and who is easily flustered. The games are a microcosm of the larger world, a small, safe space to test one another's mettle without the real-world consequences of a duel. The hours slip by, the repetitive crash of the waves and the creak of the mast providing the only background music. You may be on a dangerous voyage to an unknown land, but for a few precious hours, you're just a group of men trying to outsmart each other with pieces of wood and bone. When the dice have been put away and the board games are over, a different kind of magic takes hold of the longship. The sun has set, a thin sliver of moon hangs in the sky, and the fire in the small, central hearth casts long, flickering shadows. This is the time for stories. You huddle with your shipmates, the shared body heat a welcome defense against the night's chill. A designated storyteller, or skald, begins to speak, his voice a low, melodic rumble that seems to rise and fall with the rhythm of the waves. These aren't just fairy tales. They are the sagas, the epic poems that are the very fabric of Viking culture. They recount the heroic deeds of great kings, the battles against impossible odds, and the journeys to far-off, fantastical lands. You hear of men like Ragnar Lodbrok, who supposedly fought a giant serpent, and of Eric the Red, whose exploits led to the discovery and settlement of Greenland. The stories are told not just for entertainment, but for education. They are a way of passing down history, values, and a sense of shared identity. As the skald speaks, you can almost see the scenes unfolding before you. The clash of steel, the spray of a sea battle, the quiet determination of a man facing his destiny. A quirky detail you notice is how the sagas are not always told the same way. The skald often improvises, adding a new detail here, a fresh bit of dialogue there, to make the story more personal or to suit the mood of the crew. This is a living tradition, a testament to the dynamic nature of oral history. The story is a collaboration, a slow-building masterpiece that is shaped by each telling. This brings a joke to mind. A young skald once tried to tell a story exactly as he'd heard it. The crew, bored with the lack of surprise, told him his tale was as stale as yesterday's bread, and that he should add a monster, a ghost, or at the very least, a well-placed fart. Historians still argue whether the sagas were based on real people and events, or if they were largely works of fiction designed to inspire and entertain. While archaeological evidence sometimes supports elements of the sagas, many of the more fantastical elements are clearly embellished. The truth, most likely, lies somewhere in the middle, a kernel of historical fact wrapped in a thick, heroic layer of myth and legend. This debate doesn't matter to you right now, though. As you listen, the line between fact and fiction blurs, and all that remains is the power of the story. Sometimes, the stories are more personal, recounting tales of love, loss, and the challenges of everyday life. You hear of a man who lost his wife to a plague, or another who survived a shipwreck only to be haunted by the ghosts of his crewmates. These tales are just as important as the epic sagas, for they remind you that even the greatest warriors are still just human, vulnerable to the same joys and sorrows that everyone else faces. The stories on a long voyage are the glue that holds the crew together, a shared cultural touchstone that reminds you of who you are and where you come from. Even when home is an impossibly distant memory, the sagas fade into the night, and the last embers of the fire glow, a different kind of sound begins to emerge from the darkness. You hear the low hum of a voice, then another, joining in harmony. The Vikings, often portrayed as silent, grim warriors, also loved music and song. The sounds of the longship aren't just the creaks and groans of wood, they're also the melodies and rhythms that provided comfort and companionship in the vast emptiness. The songs are often simple, repetitive chants that help pass the time during long stretches of rowing or mending the sail. These are a bit like sea shanties, but with a grimmer edge. They speak of the gods, of home, of the great battles yet to be fought, and of the sea itself, a fickle, dangerous lover. The rhythm of the songs often matches the rhythm of the work, a practical and unifying way to keep everyone in sync. One of the old sailors sings a song about a raven flying over the waves, searching for land that never comes, and you can feel the crew's collective weariness in the low, mournful chorus. For more structured music, there are simple instruments. A quirk you notice is a man playing a jihiko, a type of bowed lyre with a horsehair string. The sound is raw and haunting, a bit like a mournful violin, and it seems to perfectly capture the melancholy beauty of the sea. Another man might have a small flute, carved from bone or wood, that he plays in quiet moments. These instruments are not the complex, ornate pieces of a royal court. They are simple, portable, and deeply personal. They are the sounds of home, carried across the sea. A joke is passed around that the jihiko players' sad tunes are a way to make the sea feel bad for them, hoping it will give them an easy voyage. Historians still argue whether music was a formal part of the longship's culture or simply a spontaneous way to pass the time. While archaeological evidence of instruments exists, the exact nature of the music is lost to time. We can only surmise from the sagas and poems that song was an integral part of their cultural identity. The idea of the Viking as a grim, silent brute is likely a misconception. They were people who, like all others, needed art and expression to make sense of their world. The music isn't just for entertainment, either. Sometimes, it takes on a more spiritual tone. You hear chants dedicated to Thor for a good wind or to Njord for safe passage. The songs are a form of prayer, a way of asking the unseen powers for a little bit of luck in a world where luck is a precious commodity. You remember a song you heard back home, a simple tune about the harvest, and you hum it to yourself softly. It's a link to the life you left behind, a small, beautiful tether that keeps you from feeling completely adrift. As the last song ends, the silence feels different, softened by the memory of the melody. When the winds are fair and the sea is calm, there's a tangible change in the mood on board. The constant strain of bailing and rowing lessens, replaced by a more focused, quieter industry. This is the time for craftsmanship and mending. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were also skilled artisans, and their longships were floating workshops. You see men pulling out small pouches of tools and working with a concentrated intensity that belies their rugged appearance. Your first task is to mend a tear in your woolen tunic. Wool, a mainstay of Viking clothing, is warm and repels water. Well, but it's not immune to the rigors of life on a longship. With a small, bone needle and some strong sinew, you carefully stitch the torn fabric back together. The work is slow and meticulous. As you work, you notice that others are doing similar tasks. One man is whittling a new handle for his axe, his knife a blur of motion as he carves the wood into a smooth, ergonomic shape. Another is meticulously sharpening his sword, the metallic rasp of stone against steel a rhythmic background noise. This practical artistry is a mainstream historical fact, showing that Viking life was a blend of brutal warfare and patient, detailed craftsmanship. The most important material on board, besides the wood of the ship itself, is rope. The longship is a tangle of lines, from the mast ropes to the mooring lines, and they're constantly under stress. You see a pair of sailors meticulously braiding new ropes from bundles of hemp and flax. Their fingers move with incredible speed and precision, weaving the individual strands into a thick, strong cord. It's a crucial skill, and they've perfected it over a lifetime. They joke that their hands are their second-best weapons, after their swords, of course. Historians still argue whether Vikings had a designated craftsperson on board or if these skills were common to all sailors. Given the self-sufficient nature of a long voyage, it's highly likely that every crew member possessed a basic knowledge of mending and crafting. The ability to repair your own gear was not a luxury. It was a necessity for survival. A broken shield strap or a dull axe could mean the difference between life and death in a skirmish. A quirky detail you observe is a man carving a tiny, intricate horse from a piece of driftwood. He's not a king or a great warrior. He's a simple sailor, but his hands create something beautiful and delicate from a gnarled piece of wood. When you ask him about it, he simply says it's for his daughter. This small, personal act of creation in the middle of the vast, indifferent ocean, is a powerful reminder of the life and people waiting for you at home. It's a little piece of art born from necessity and a quiet love, a tiny anchor to the world you left behind. The day-to-day rhythm of the longship is punctuated by the ritual of eating. The crew gathers around the small hearth, a simple fire pit in the center of the ship, which is used for warmth and for cooking when conditions allow. The menu is, to put it mildly, limited. There are no fresh fruits or vegetables, no warm bread, straight from the oven. Instead, the ship's larder is a study in preservation and practicality. The bulk of the diet consists of dried fish and salted meat. The fish, typically cod or herring, are so hard and dry they must be soaked in seawater to make them remotely edible. You'll find yourself gnawing on a piece of this tough, leathery fish, and while it's not exactly delicious, it provides the necessary protein and salt to keep you going. The salted meat, usually pork or mutton, is just as hard and just as salty. It's a taste you get used to, a constant reminder that you are a long way from home. A joke circulates that the food is so hard, the old men without teeth are the only ones who can stomach it, as they can't taste it properly anyway. Another crucial part of the diet is skyr, a kind of fermented milk product similar to yogurt. It's thick and tangy and keeps for a long time without spoiling. It's often mixed with a bit of water to make it more palatable and to stretch the rations. A quirky detail you notice is that some of the men have a personal stash of dried berries or nuts, a small, treasured luxury that they'll only bring out on special occasions or when the morale of the crew is particularly low. This small act of sharing a personal treat is a powerful show of camaraderie. Historians still argue whether Vikings on long sea voyages had enough provisions to prevent scurvy and other vitamin deficiencies. While the diet of dried meat and fish was high in protein, it lacked the necessary vitamin C found in fresh produce. The presence of skyr and some dried berries might have helped, but it's likely that long, uninterrupted voyages without stopping to replenish supplies would have led to health problems. For now, you simply accept what is given, grateful for the sustenance. Wash it all down. There's water, but it's not always fresh. Water on the ship is stored in wooden barrels, and, over time, it becomes brackish and stagnant. The taste is awful, a mix of wood and decay, and you learn to drink it quickly, holding your breath to avoid the smell. Sometimes, if the weather is good and there's a light rain, the crew will put out a piece of canvas to collect the fresh rainwater. The taste of that pure, clean water is a rare and profound luxury, a reminder of the simple pleasures of the world. But most of the time, it's just the old, musty water. You learn to live with the taste, just as you learn to live with the constant motion of the sea. With bellies full of hardtack and stale water, the crew finds another way to pass the time and keep their minds off the endless voyage: physical training. Life on the longship isn't all rowing and bailing. It's also about staying in fighting shape. The Vikings were, first and foremost, warriors, and a long journey was no excuse to get soft. The open deck, though small and constantly shifting, becomes a makeshift training ground. You and your shipmates engage in a variety of exercises designed to maintain strength and agility. One of the simplest and most effective is wrestling. You pair up with another sailor, and for a few minutes, you grapple on the deck, trying to throw each other without falling overboard. The constant motion of the ship adds a layer of difficulty, forcing you to use your core and leg strength to maintain balance. It's a great way to let off some steam and build camaraderie, and the losers are often met with good-natured taunts. A new joke you hear is that the ship's rocking makes it a fair fight, since even the best wrestler has to contend with the sea's sense of humor. Mock combat is another popular activity. The men will take up wooden practice swords and shields, and for a few minutes, they will engage in a light-hearted sparring session. The goal isn't to hurt anyone. It's to practice technique, footwork, and strategy. You learn to block a blow with your shield and to counter with a quick thrust. The sounds of wooden swords clacking against shields echo over the waves, a small symphony of combat. This is a mainstream historical fact, as staying in peak physical condition was paramount for Viking warriors. A successful raid or battle depended on the fitness and readiness of the crew. Historians still argue whether these mock battles were a form of entertainment or a serious part of military training. It's likely a bit of both. They serve to keep the warrior's skills sharp while also providing a welcome break from the monotony of the voyage. The constant practice ensured that when a real battle came, the crew would act as a cohesive, well-drilled unit. A quirky detail you notice is the use of a simple rock. One of the sailors has a heavy, smooth stone that he uses for strength training. He's constantly passing it from hand to hand, flexing his fingers and forearms, or simply lifting it over his head. It's a simple but effective way to build grip strength, which is essential for wielding a sword or an axe for a long period of time. You watch him with admiration, a silent respect for his dedication. In these moments, you're not just a group of sailors, but a crew of warriors, and the sea is your quiet, patient training master. The sky, which has been your silent companion for so long, can also become your worst enemy. One moment, the waves are gentle swells. The next, the sea seems to rise up, a living, angry beast determined to swallow you whole. A dark smear on the horizon quickly morphs into a wall of black clouds. This is a storm, and you can feel the shift in the crew's demeanor. The light-hearted joking stops, replaced by a grim, focused tension. This is a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. The first sign is the wind. It goes from a steady push to a frantic, howling gale that tears at the sail. The captain gives a series of sharp, urgent commands, and you and the others scramble to lower the sail, pulling at the ropes with a desperate strength you didn't know you had. Once the sail is down, you lash it tightly to the yard, securing the mast as best you can. The longship, now at the mercy of the waves, begins to roll and pitch with a terrifying violence. The sounds of the ship change from a gentle groan to a series of sharp cracks and groans, as if the timbers are screaming in protest that you're drenched in an instant. The waves now crashing over the side in a freezing torrent. You cling to the gunwale, your knuckles white, and feel the longship being tossed about like a child's toy. The rain comes down in horizontal sheets, stinging your face and blinding you. You can hear the thunder, a low, guttural roar that seems to come from the depths of the ocean itself. Lightning flashes, illuminating the churning, monstrous waves around you, their white crests like the teeth of a giant beast. It's an overwhelming, humbling experience. You are so small, so fragile, and the sea is so unbelievably powerful. A quiet joke passes between two older sailors who have seen this before. One yells to the other over the roar of the wind that the gods are simply trying to get their attention. But with all the racket, he's having a hard time listening. A quirky tidbit you notice is that some of the men have small carved idols of Thor, the god of thunder, that they hold tightly in their hands. They mutter quiet prayers and incantations to him, a simple, heartfelt plea for mercy. Historians still argue whether the Vikings believed their gods were actively involved in the day-to-day weather or if these were more symbolic rituals to give them a sense of control in a chaotic world. To you, in this moment, the distinction is meaningless. All that matters is a desperate hope for deliverance. The storm can last for hours or even days. It's a period of sleepless, exhausting vigilance. You take turns bailing water, your muscles screaming with the effort. You and the others form a human chain, passing the buckets of water, a rhythmic, frantic ballet of survival. When the storm finally breaks, it's not with a sudden calm, but with a slow, gradual lessening of the wind and waves. The sky lightens, and you find yourself utterly exhausted, but alive. The longship, battered but not broken, has survived another trial, and so have you. The storm has passed, leaving you and your crewmates weary and bruised. The physical toll of the journey is becoming increasingly evident. Scrapes from ropes, splinters from the deck, and the occasional cut from a rusty tool are a constant reality. This is where a different kind of skill comes into play, a basic, often brutal, knowledge of first aid. There are no physicians on board, no sterile instruments, or sophisticated remedies. You're all you have. For a minor cut or scrape, the remedy is simple. You first clean the wound with seawater, which, while stinging, is at least a salty antiseptic. Then, you might apply a poultice made from chewed-up herbs and mosses, a practice that's both a mainstream historical fact and a bit of a grim necessity. The old sailors have an encyclopedic knowledge of which plants do what. They can identify a particular type of lichen from home that, if dried and powdered, can stop a wound from festering. You also see them using thin strips of leather or linen to bind a wound, a rough but effective way to keep it closed and clean. A little joke is made about a new crew member asking a grizzled veteran what the best medicine is. The old salt simply grunts, "Stay on the ship and away from the other fellow's axes." For more serious injuries, the treatment is far less pleasant. If a bone is broken, a crew member with a steady hand will try to set it, a painful procedure that requires all your strength to endure in silence. The injured limb is then splinted with two pieces of wood and tied with rope, and you're expected to rest and heal as best you can. The survival rate for serious injuries on a long voyage is, predictably, not high. You're reminded that the biggest threats aren't always a raiding party or a storm, but a simple infection that can fester and take a man's life just as surely as a sword. Historians still argue whether Vikings had a formal understanding of hygiene and sanitation on long voyages. While they used antiseptics like salt water and some herbs, the cramped, open-air conditions of a longship were a breeding ground for disease. It's likely that many died from illnesses we could easily treat today. A quirky detail you notice is the belief in a good wound licking. The men believed a quick lick from a clean tongue, whether from a fellow human or a loyal dog, if one was on board, could help cleanse a cut. It sounds gross, but in an age without germ theory, it seemed to make a certain kind of sense. The belief in this odd remedy highlights the strange blend of empirical observation and folk superstition that characterized Viking medicine. You are surrounded by the vastness of the sea and the indifference of the sky, a feeling that can be profoundly isolating. In these moments, the spiritual beliefs of the Vikings come to the fore, offering a sense of order and meaning in a world of chaos. You see it in the quiet rituals performed on the deck, the small gestures of reverence that offer a link to the divine. This is the solace of spiritual belief, the quiet hope that you are not entirely alone. The most common of these is the quiet tribute to the gods. You notice a man pouring a small amount of ale, or, more likely, stale water, over the side of the ship as an offering to Agur, the personification of the sea. He mutters a quiet prayer, asking for a calm journey and a safe passage. Another might carve a small rune into the deck planking, a symbol meant to bring good fortune and protection. These are not grand, public ceremonies. They are small, personal acts of faith, born of a deep-seated belief that the gods are watching and listening. A quirky detail is the belief in household spirits, or landvetter. While these were typically associated with the spirits of the land, some sailors believed that small, protective spirits also inhabited their longships. You see a man leave a tiny, carved piece of wood near the prow of the ship, a little offering for the ship's own spirit, hoping it will be pleased and protect them. This belief highlights the animistic core of Norse religion, where everything, from the land to the ship, was thought to have its own life force. Historians still argue whether Viking religious practices were more about appeasing powerful, indifferent gods, or if they were deeply personal and heartfelt expressions of faith. While we know of grand sacrificial rituals and communal gatherings, the quiet, personal prayers on the longship suggest that their relationship with the divine was a very intimate one. The gods were not just distant figures of myth. They were active, sometimes capricious, forces in their lives to eye in the dead of night. You might hear a low, rhythmic chant directed toward Odin, the Allfather. The chant is not for a battle or a raid, but for wisdom and a safe return. Odin was a complex god, associated with war, but also with knowledge and poetry, and the men on the longship seek his guidance as they navigate the unknown. You're not just a warrior on a journey. You are a person of faith, your destiny tied to the whims of powerful, unseen beings. The belief in these gods, from the mighty Thor to the cunning Loki, provides a framework for understanding the world, from the violent storms to the calm, beautiful days. It gives you a sense of purpose and, most importantly, a glimmer of hope. After weeks of nothing but the endless blue and the gray sky, a change begins to creep into the air. It's a subtle thing at first, a feeling more than a fact, but it brings a palpable shift in the mood of the crew. You notice it in the way the men sniff the air, their heads turn to the wind, as if they are bloodhounds on a scent. This is the moment when observing nature becomes a serious business, a collective effort to find the subtle signs of land. The first sign is often a change in the water itself. For a long time, the water has been a deep, uniform blue, a color that seems to have no end. Now, you notice a greenish tinge to it, a subtle shift that tells you the water is becoming shallower. A sailor with decades of experience dips a hand into the water and brings it to his nose. He closes his eyes for a moment, and then a slow smile spreads across his face. Fresh water, he says, not from the sky, but from the rivers that feed the sea. It's a quirk you'd never have noticed on your own, a tiny detail that holds a universe of meaning. Then come the birds. For weeks, the only birds you've seen are the hardy, ocean-going gulls and petrels. But one morning, you spot a different kind of bird, a small, land-dwelling species you recognize from home. It's a puffin, bobbing on the waves. The crew goes wild, cheering and pointing. It's a powerful sign, a beacon of hope, and it confirms the feeling that you are finally, mercifully, getting close. You find yourself scanning the horizon, your eyes straining for any sign of a dark shape against the endless expanse of the sea. You remember a joke from back home, a farmer who, upon spotting a bird, said it meant either land was near or it was a very lost bird. At this point, you're hoping for the former. Historians still argue whether Vikings used specific bird species, like the raven, for navigation. The sagas tell tales of ravens being released and followed, but there is little archaeological evidence to support this as a widespread practice. It's more likely that they used a combination of bird sightings and other natural cues, a mainstream historical fact that showcases their profound knowledge of the natural world. They were not just sailors, they were naturalists, with a deep understanding of the language of the sea and the sky. The mood on the longship is electric. The air is filled with a new kind of energy. The weariness of the journey is still there, but it's now mixed with a fervent, almost desperate hope. You're no longer just sailing, you're hunting. You're searching for the final, most glorious sign of all, and you know, deep in your bones, that it's just over the horizon. The signs are everywhere now, a crescendo of hope that pushes you and your crewmates forward. The birds are more numerous, the water a lighter, murkier green, and there's a different, earthy smell in the air, a smell of pine and soil, a scent so glorious it almost brings tears to your eyes. The captain, who has been standing stoically at the steering or for weeks, now has a glint in his eye. He gives the call, a sharp, clear command that rings out over the water. Land. And there it is, a thin, dark line on the horizon. It's so small, so unassuming, that for a moment you almost miss it. But as the longship surges forward, the line grows into a solid shape, a mass of green and brown that is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. It's not just land. It's the end of the journey, the promise of solid ground, of fresh water, and of a world that doesn't constantly rock and pitch under your feet. The crew erupts in a low, rumbling cheer, a mix of relief and a fierce, triumphant joy. You remember a joke you heard on a previous voyage. The greatest victory is not a battle won, but a shore reached. With the land in sight, the final push begins. The men who have been rowing for weeks with a resigned weariness now row with a fresh, frenetic energy. Every stroke of the oar is a victory, a final, defiant act of will against the sea. The captain, now focused and intent, guides the longship toward a sheltered cove, his eyes scanning for any hidden shoals or rocks. This is a mainstream historical fact. Navigating the treacherous coastal waters was often more dangerous than the open sea. The Vikings had an intimate knowledge of coastal geography, a skill that was vital for their survival. A quirky detail you notice is how the men prepare their gear. They're not just celebrating, they're getting ready for what comes next. Shields are polished, axes are sharpened, and mail shirts are checked for weak links. This is the moment of transition from sailor to warrior. A long voyage was often a prelude to a raid or a trade, and the Vikings knew that their journey wasn't over until their mission was complete. They're a crew of weary sailors, but they are also a force to be reckoned with. A joke is made about one of the men who, in his excitement, accidentally cuts himself while sharpening his axe. The old salts just shake their heads and say, some men are so eager for a fight, they'll start one with themselves. Historians still argue whether Vikings viewed the journey as a means to an end or as an important part of the experience in its own right. While the goal was to reach a new land to raid or trade, the journey itself, with its trials and its triumphs, was a profound rite of passage that shaped the men and forged an unbreakable bond between them. For you, in this moment, the journey has been everything. It has tested your mettle, and it has changed you forever. The longship glides into the sheltered cove, the shallow water a final, beautiful expanse of blue-green. The smell of the shore is overwhelming, a rich mix of wet earth, green leaves, and the lingering scent of wood smoke from a distant village. The sound of the waves has changed, too, from a constant, deafening roar to a gentle lapping against the hull. You are here. You made it. The captain gives the final command, and the anchor is dropped with a resounding plunk that echoes off the trees. The first step on solid ground is an indescribable feeling. Your legs, which have been accustomed to the constant, subtle motion of the sea, feel weak and wobbly. The earth itself seems to be swaying. You stumble a little, but the feeling of firm, unmoving ground beneath your feet is a luxury you never knew you missed so much. You drop to one knee, your hand pressing into the wet soil, and you just breathe in the smell of it, this rich, earthy scent of life. It's a moment of profound, quiet gratitude. The work, of course, is not over. The crew begins the process of unloading, of securing the longship, and of setting up a temporary camp. There is an immediate need for fresh water, and a group of men is sent with leather skins to a nearby stream. Another group begins to make a fire, and the sight of the crackling flame, a real fire not confined to a small hearth, is a powerful symbol of your arrival. You recall the shared hardships, the endless nights, the cold spray, and the fear of the storm, and you feel a fierce pride in what you have accomplished. A joke is made that the first thing everyone did was check their legs, just to make sure they hadn't turned into fins yet. This is the end of the journey, but it is also the beginning of the next chapter. The purpose of the voyage, whether it was to raid a foreign shore or to trade with a distant people, now comes to the fore. But for this moment, there is a quiet pause, a shared breath of relief. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' first instinct upon arrival was to prepare for battle or to simply rest. While the sagas glorify the raids, it's likely that the exhaustion of a long voyage demanded a period of rest and recovery. This is a mainstream historical fact that reminds us that even the fiercest warriors were still just human, with human needs. A quirky detail you notice is a man carefully unbraiding his beard, a small, private ritual that signals the end of the sea voyage. The feeling is one of transition, of shedding one's identity as a sailor and reclaiming one's identity as a man of the land. You stand there for a moment, the sea behind you and the land before you, and you realize that you are not the same person who left that distant shore. You are a little bit wiser, a little bit more weary, and a little bit more resilient. The sea has marked you, but you have also conquered it. And now, as the sun begins to set over this new land, and the work slowly winds down, you can finally feel the day's journey coming to a gentle close. The sounds of the new shore, the rustling of leaves, the quiet chirp of an unfamiliar bird, begin to replace the creaks and groans of the longship. The air is still, the world is quiet, and the ground is, for the first time in a very long time, completely solid. You feel the weariness in your bones, a heavy but welcome weight, and you know that you have earned this rest. You can finally close your eyes and let the sleep